My name is Lori Phinney, and I am a species at risk biologist with the Mersey Tobeatic Research Institute. And today we're going to explore bats in Nova Scotia, conservation efforts going on in the region, and then how you can be a bat steward. So a little bit about where I work. So the name of the organization is the Mersey Tobeatic Research Institute, or MTRI for short. We're located just down the road from Kejimkujik National Park and National Historic Site. We're a nonprofit research institute, and we specialize in biodiversity conservation by involving the community and the public, as well as a lot of partners such as universities, government, and other NGOs. A lot of our projects focus on species at risk, such as the Blanding's turtle, pictured here in the bottom, the monarch butterfly, and of course, bats as well. Today, I want to tell you what exactly bats are to start off with. And so the main thing to know about bats is that they're very unique and they're very special. They're unlike any other animal we explore and we see around Nova Scotia. What makes them so unique is that they're the only flying mammal, not only here, but in the world. So we have other animals like flying squirrels, and they're actually just animals that glide, but this species or this taxa, bats truly are the only flying mammal. And with their name, so we have a scientific name for them, Chiroptera, and what that means is hand wing. So if you can think of a bird and their wings are actually made from their arm bones, whereas bats, their wings are actually made from elongated finger bones. So if you can think of a bat flying, they're actually basically flying with long hands with kind of skin in between. If you see a group of bats, the name for a group of bats is called a colony. And the bats can live for a very long time, which is pretty amazing because if you think about mice, they're pretty short-lived. But for bats, some of them have been found to live up to 30 or 40 years. We also have quite a size range for bats. So across the world, we can have bats that are just about 2 inches big, really, really small, the bumblebee bat, and then those flying fox bats that have huge wingspans longer than the span of my arms. Here are some of those different types of bats that we can kind of see across the world. And so in the top left here, I have an Indian flying fox. And so they're a bat that loves to eat fruit, such as figs and mangoes. But those aren't the kind of bats we have here. But those are some of the bats that we tend to see now on social media and in videos, kind of eating those fruits in a wildlife rehab center or something like that. And then we also have these bats that we've kind of seen in a lot of stories that we've read, sometimes in cartoons as the villain maybe. And those are the bats that eat or drink blood. But the thing is that we have over 1,400 species of bats across the world. And species like the vampire bat pictured here are actually really not that common. They're only found in South America, and there's only 3 out of the 1,400 species of bats that actually drink blood. So although some of these bats are the ones that we hear about quite often, the bats that we have in Canada and Nova Scotia actually eat bugs. And so pictured here on the right is a photo of a bat that we commonly see in Canada. So this is the little brown bat, and it's found all across Canada. And so bats that eat bugs, we often think of them as eating mosquitoes, but they also really like to eat moss and beetles, an array of insects that you can find across the region. Some bat facts that are really relevant to the types of bats here we have in Nova Scotia are that they're furry. So if you have a look and you kind of think of a bird in contrast, so birds have feathers, right, and they fly, but bats have fur, kind of like your pet dog potentially. And so they can be quite fuzzy. And we've kind of covered that they fly, but a really unique thing about them that we don't see in a lot of other animals is that they sleep upside down. And so for them, it's really convenient because it actually takes basically no energy for them to sleep upside down. If you try and do a handstand, it's probably pretty difficult for you to hold that, but for a bat just to hang upside down from a tree or a cave is almost effortless. And so we see them do this when they're sleeping, also known as roosting, and as well as when they're hibernating during the winter. My probably favorite thing about bats is that they echolocate. And so what this means is that they use sound to see their environment. So instead of relying on eyesight, they use sound to capture what's going on. So the sound will come out of their mouth, bounce off the object in front of them, and give them information about, is there a tree in front of me? Is there a bug in front of me? Or is one of my friends over there? Now, I'm going to show you a video of what this will look like, a bat echolocating to find its food. So this is a video of slow motion bat feeding. And so this bat is out at night. You can see its wings, and at the end, you can see actually its tail there. They actually have kind of a tail pouch. And what's going on here is that the bat is using its tail pouch and its mouth to kind of catch the insect. And what's really unique about a lot of the species of bats we have in Canada is that they emit sounds that are above our hearing range. And so we use a lot of special technology to be able to capture these sounds and pick up the sounds that they make while they're out foraging around looking for food. So let's get into what kind of bats we see around here. So there's actually 7 types of bats that have been documented in Nova Scotia. And here are 6 of those, and I'll get into the 7th after. And I've separated them here in the top as the bats that we have that spend their time year-round in Nova Scotia. But then we have these other bats pictured here in the bottom that are only here during the spring to the fall. And so what they do is they migrate once it gets cold. So the ones at the top are actually the ones that are most abundant. So we see them the most often and they're the most numerous. And the one that we see the most common out of all of these is the first one, the little brown bat. And so this is a small bat. Often it weighs less than 10 grams and it has brown fur. So its name is quite characteristic of what it actually looks like. And if you kind of look at the top 3 bats, they're all kind of brown and small. And so one way to tell the difference between these types of bats is by looking at their ears. So the second bat gets its name from having a longer ear than the little brown bat. And so one way we do that is by looking at the tragus, which is this little piece we have in front of our ear here. If you look at these 2 first bats, and you look at their tragus, you can see that there's a long, skinnier version of it on the northern long-eared bat. So pretty hard to tell if you were to see these bats just flying around at night. It would be pretty difficult. So often bat researchers will handle these animals to figure out what type of bat they are exactly. The last bat at the top here, the tricolor bat, is really unique. And the reason it's called the tricolor bat is because each individual hair actually has 3 different colors. So it starts off with the hair being black at the root, and then it turns into yellow. And then on the actual tip of each individual hair is brown. And so these are the bats, again, that we see most often, whereas the ones below we don't see as often, but the ones below are very distinct. So if you were ever to capture a picture of them, we would be easily able to tell the difference between the top ones and the bottom ones. And so you can look for things like the white tipped fur on the hoary bat and the silver-haired bat, or the vibrant reddish yellowish fur of the eastern red bat. This last one that I'm going to point out that we've had in Nova Scotia, we haven't seen very much. So we've only documented it a few times in the province. Usually people only see it as far as New Brunswick. And so we don't really consider this one of the main bats that we would see, or that people would, if you were to see a bat, we would guess that it is probably not that kind. And so the last sighting was in 2007, actually in the Oxford blueberry plant. So next I want to take you to some of the places that we actually see bats. And so mainly focusing on the little brown bat. And for that, and that's because we see it most often, but it's also, of all those types of bats, the one that's most adapted to living in a lot of different places. So we see little brown bats in the forest, foraging over rivers, but they're also really well adapted to living in places that we've built. So sometimes scientists or bat biologists refer those as anthropogenic structures. So that is a fancy name for your house, a barn, your shed, and various structures. And so those places make great homes because they can be quite warm for the bats to live during the summer. And one reason they want to be warm during the summer is because that's when they have their babies. And so the name for a baby bat is actually called a pup. So I have a few pictures here of what those bats look like as they grow up and they get older. And what's really neat about female bats is that they gather all together in some of those places I just showed you to have their pups all together as a group. So in this top photo on the left, you can see a group of female bats all huddling together that likely gathered to have their pups together. And baby bats are quite strong and learn really quick. So it takes about 3 weeks for some of these young bats to grow up and be able to be independent and fly on their own. So after we see bats throughout the summer in a lot of these places like forests and on our properties and our houses maybe or in barns or in bat boxes, they spend the end of summer and the beginning of fall eating a lot of insects. And what they're doing is they're preparing to go into hibernation. And so what they're going to do is rely on that fat reserve, lower their body temperature, lower their immune system, and stay put to conserve energy and not really do much. And this is because during the winter, as you know, when you go outside right now, you're not really seeing any moths or mosquitoes for them to feed on. So they're relying on eating a lot to make it throughout the winter. And so we often see little brown bats in a variety of places. They have been documented in buildings, but more often we're seeing them in caves and underground mines. Now, one thing that's happened in the last decade or two is something really tragic at their overwintering sites. So if you see this picture here, I want you to take a close look. And there's something going on in the bottom of this photo. So this is a cave or a mine, and this is in the States, and this was around between 2005 and 2006. And so we started seeing something really strange. We had cavers report hundreds and thousands of dead bats on the floor of caves and mines. And people had no idea what was going on. And so the cavers kind of got together with bat biologists and started taking a closer look and noticed this like white fuzzy stuff growing on their faces. And so people were clueless as to like what was growing on their face and why. And so in a really short period of time, the community of bat researchers had to learn a lot about what this white fuzzy stuff was growing on their face. Today, we know that white fuzzy stuff as white nose syndrome. And so on the far left photo, you can see two little bats with white fuzzy stuff in their face, and you can kind of tell that it's growing on their wings. And so this white fuzzy stuff was also causing on their wings a lot of scars and lesions. So in the second photo, you can kind of see a bat wing spread out and some of the damage that disease has caused. And so where this disease is coming from is this fungus called Pseudogenomnascus destructans. If you're at home right now, feel free to try saying that. And because that's such a hard name, what we tend to do is to shorten it to a fancy 2 letters. So some researchers will call it PD. So you can be to your parents, you can say, do you know what PD is? And they probably won't know. But so this fungus was first found in New York State, and we've learned that it likely came from Europe, so it's not naturally here. And so bats have not evolved to deal with this fungus and survive it. So millions of bats died once this fungus kind of got to New York. But then what happened is because bats are so social and they like to sleep together or roost together during hibernation, this disease quickly spread. There's also a lot of information about people also spreading it because, as you know, or as you may know, cavers really like to explore a lot of different places. Some people kind of went from cave to cave. So we think that there's a few ways that the fungus got around, but especially through bats being so social. The main problem that this fungus is causing bats is that during the winter, they're supposed to be hibernating, but they're waking up about twice as often as they would if they didn't have the fungus. And so they are basically running out of gas in their car, basically. And so they're not able to make it until the end of hibernation. And so we had to, as a bat community, come together and estimate how many bats possibly had died from this fungus. And so from 2006 to 2012, the estimate was about 6 million bats. And so there isn't a more recent estimate than that because it's really hard to know exactly how many bats there were before and how many are there now. But this happened in a really short period of time. So I'm going to show you a map. So this is of North America. And on the far upper right, we have Nova Scotia. So if you're with your parents or your family and they want to point out to you where Nova Scotia is, feel free to do that. And so from New York, kind of in the blue colors on the map, the fungus quickly spread from that area all the way up to where we live, which is in more of like the yellowy, there's a little bit of orange as well, yellowy, greeny colors. And so what's really scary and why this is one of the worst wildlife diseases in modern history is because it's killing a lot of bats, but it's just spreading so quickly that we haven't had a lot of chance to kind of get a grip on this disease. And so in Nova Scotia, we first found out that it was here and back in 2011. There are some people out doing some checks on the bats in some of the overwintering sites we know about here. And we started seeing those bats sick outside, kind of on the ground, which normally you never see a bat on the ground. So quite unusual. And so the estimates back then by 2013 was that 95% of our bats disappeared. So because of this kind of wildlife catastrophe, we've really had to come together with the public, with researchers, and with a variety of organizations to kind of learn fast or quickly address what was going on. And so there's been a lot of community effort and collaboration among organizations to kind of conserve bats and figure out how we can best help them. So one of those projects, I actually did a master's study on bat populations to get a more recent assessment of how bats are doing in Nova Scotia. And so I used these things called acoustic monitors. So they're pictured here in the top right hand. So they kind of look like a little trail cam. And what I did is I put those up to record bat echolocations to see if I would hear bat voices more or less often than we used to see before the fungus white nose syndrome came here. And so when I did that, I found out that bat populations are still very low. And probably the main reason for this is that because bats that we have in Nova Scotia typically only have one pup per year, it's going to take them a very, very long time to kind of come back and rebound to how many bats we would have seen potentially before this fungus decimated populations. But there's a lot of other good things going on. So aside my research project, there's been a couple other studies looking at bats in the region to see how they're doing and what species are being affected versus others. And so we're kind of putting that information together now about like the little brown bat, the northern long-eared bat, and the tricolor bat, and seeing if they're all affected the same, if they're all affected differently. The other thing that's been going on is we've been trying to get bat research together and meet together. But of course, it's a little bit hard with COVID. So the first conference or the first meeting was in person in 2019. And then the last one was in 2020. And it was actually set for the week that COVID was declared a pandemic. And so that moved to online. And hopefully, once again, we can meet down the road in person. The other thing I wanted to tell you guys about for bat conservation is that for other animals like birds, there's these like national programs such as the Christmas bird count that have been operating for decades and decades. And so they've been capturing information on what birds we see most often from year to year. And there really hasn't been something like that for bats. There's been a lot of more short-term work. And so more recently, into Atlantic Canada, we've brought this national monitoring program called the North American Bat Monitoring Program. And so that relies on those acoustic monitors, those little detectors with microphones that detect bat voices to see how bat populations are doing. The last thing I want to talk about for bat conservation, and then we'll get into the bat hotline, is that in the past, we had a reporting hotline for people like you to call if you saw a bat. And more recently, there's been a hotline put together for all of Atlantic Canada. So now you have a couple options to call to report your bat sightings, but also to ask any questions you have about bats. So I just wanted to show you, if you could hear that, one of the bat echolocations that you would pick up if you were using one of these acoustic monitors to study bat voices and what species you're seeing. So here's some photos of bat reports. So this is from the Nova Scotia Bat Reporting website. There's also a phone number you can call as well. And because bat populations declined so quickly, we really wanted to act fast. So the Mersey Tobeatic Research Institute and the provincial government kind of teamed together to put out this bat reporting platform really quickly so that we could get information from the public about where they were seeing bats and when. And so some of the photos pictured here are from the last couple of years. So the first one was in Yarmouth County. The second one was in Digby County, and that was of a bat that had been found in someone's tub. And so you can see that some of the fur is quite wet. And that was back in, I think that was in August 2020. And then the last one is a place where we're not expecting to see bats, but we're seeing more reports of people finding bats in patio umbrellas. And so that sighting is from 2019. And so from these reports, what we can do is we can use it to promote outreach about bats, monitoring and research. And so one of the things we've been doing with these sightings is working with people to monitor bats on their property. So what we do is we go through the sightings and we contact those people, and if they seem to potentially have a colony of bats, so if you have several bats roosting in your attic, there's a good chance that that could be a maternity colony of female bats, and then we can monitor them as they emerge at night to see how many bats are in the area. So although bat numbers are low, it's quite inspiring that we've had over 4,500 reports of bats since the hotline was established and the website. And last year alone, we had over 500 reports. Here are some of those bats, and I'm not really talking a lot about those migratory species that kind of leave here once it gets cold. They tend to go down kind of to the southern United States or into warmer temperatures once we get our snow and cold weather. And so if you happen to get a photo of a bat, it can help us identify potentially what type of bat you are seeing. So keep in mind, if you do see a bat and you are able to get a photo, that can be quite helpful. But again, that's a very small chance, because if you've ever tried to take a bat or even a bird flying, it's really difficult because they're just moving so fast. And so these, I think the first one I have written down, it's from Halifax County in fall 2020. And that was actually of a deceased bat. And you can tell from the color here that it's red. So it was quite obvious that it was an eastern red bat. And so we were able to work with that person to actually get the sample collected and then send it off for testing. And then it might make its way to the museum to be on display as part of their specimen collection. So if you ever find a deceased bat, the numbers that I'm going to post at the end, you can contact to reach out to, and we can give you the information on how to proceed with that. So I'm going to finish off with talking about how you can be a bat steward. So we've talked about what kind of bats you can see, which ones you're more likely to see, and where you can see them. Now, thinking about how we talked about the summer versus the winter, you're way less likely to see them during the winter, and that's because they're hibernating. So it's quite a lot easier for people to be involved during the summer. So when you're out in the evenings having a campfire, sitting out on the deck, just keep your eyes peeled and look for bats. You never know where they could be out and about flying. And some people actually see them sometimes while they're driving, which is always surprising. So the first thing you can do is get involved. So looking for bats. We're going to hear a little bit more about bat box project going on in Nova Scotia after I finish up. But building a bat box is a great way to monitor bats. It can be quite difficult sometimes to see bats exit from a tree or from the eaves of your house. So one thing that's really great about bat boxes, if they do take up in your bat box, is that as they exit, you have a better gauge if there's actually bats in there or not. So I'm going to show you a photo next of one way to tell if there's bats in your bat box. So here on the photo on the right is a landowner in Annapolis County that put a bat box on the side of their house or their cottage. And below the bat box, you can see a huge pile of guano. So it was very obvious that this bat box was being used by bats. And it was really interesting. So this landowner thought that they had about 40 bats. And then we went and helped did a count with them as the bats kind of exit at night to go out and feed, and found out that there was closer to almost 100. So really exciting given that bat populations are so low. So please keep in mind that you never know what can happen if you put up a bat box. So getting involved is closely linked to the second way to be a bat steward, is reporting your sightings. So here is a poster that we put up when bat populations started dropping off in 2013. And here's the hotline in the website, and talking about how those 3 species of bats that hibernate, those are the ones that died off from the disease. And they actually became listed as endangered, which is super helpful because when animals get listed as a species at risk, we're able to allot a lot more funding towards them to support their conservation. The last thing I want to point out is there's a Nova Scotia Species at Risk guide. And so this guide captures pages on all the animals that are at risk in the province, and you can find it for free online at sarguide.speciesatrisk.ca. And so in that guide, you can download the whole guide or individual pages. In those individual pages, there's some about the 3 species of bats. So feel free to look this up and share it with your family and friends as a way to tell them about how bats are doing in Nova Scotia, as well as any other species at risk in the province. I'm just finishing up now, so I'd like to thank a few people, and then I'm going to show you some resources. So we've worked really closely with the federal and provincial government, as well as the University of Waterloo and the Canadian Wildlife Federation, as well as Parks Canada at Kejimkujik National Park on a lot of these projects. And so if you see bats or you think you have bats on your property and you want to work with us, feel free to email or call me, which is the first email and phone number here. As well as you can reach out to me to get any of these resources to simplify it. And so if you see a bat in Nova Scotia, you can visit batconservation.ca or call the Species at Risk hotline. If you see a bat outside of Nova Scotia or in Nova Scotia, you can call the Atlantic Canada Bat Hotline. But the benefit to this hotline is not only if you see a bat in a different province, if you're traveling around, is that they provide accurate and up-to-date information about what to do if you have bats in your house and you're not sure if you want them there, if you have questions about bats and rabies, or if you accidentally came in contact with a bat, what to do. So this information is available for free, so feel free to check it out sometime, as well as the Bat Conservation website. The last thing I'm going to finish off with is the Bat Box, Annapolis Valley Bat Box project. So there's an email here below, and they are building and helping give people bat boxes if you're interested in connecting with them and you're in the area. So anyway, thank you to all for listening and about bats in Nova Scotia. And I hope that you've learned a little bit more about what kind of bats we have here and what you can do to help.
Hey, thanks, Lori. Yeah, so if you guys have questions for Lori about all things bats, go ahead, stick them in the chat. I know that I'm going to have some questions for her. I know that because there's a bit of a lag here, I'll give you guys some time to put your questions in there, and we'll go right over to Taylor next. So Taylor actually has built some bat boxes with us, the Young Naturalists Club, before, and probably some of you tuning in today remember Taylor's group, because Taylor also runs another youth group who are really good at building bat boxes. So yeah, Taylor, I'll let you take over from here.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'll just give me a minute here and I'll share my screen. I've got a short little presentation for you, nothing too scary. See if this decides that it wants to open here. I'm just going to talk about a bit about the program that I run really quickly. Some of you might be getting into that age where you're aging out of the Young Naturalist Club and kind of looking for the next cool thing that you want to do, and we'd love to have you in our program. So my name's Taylor. I work for the Canadian Wildlife Federation. I am one of 2 youth leaders here in Halifax. Emily, my partner, unfortunately couldn't be here today. I lead a group of youth around Halifax, and we do amazing outdoor adventure activities. And we're also in 14 cities across Canada. So it's definitely not the only place that this program occurs, but we're brand spanking new. We're only about a year old. So we're just kind of starting to get running. And we're back to doing outdoor activities now. COVID kind of sent us for a bit of a loop, but we're back outside now, which is very exciting. So what's really wonderful about Wild Outside, and I'll talk a bit about it before we actually go into what we did with our bat boxes. Wild Outside is a completely free program. It's really unique in that respect. A lot of these programs require fees. We're totally funded. We're free, and we're also barrier free. So we try to make sure that we're inclusive to all communities and all ability levels. To make sure that everyone can participate in the outdoors at their own pace and at their own speed. So we have 29 youth currently in the program, and here's some photos of some of the lovely youth that we have there. We've gone on some amazing adventures. We're a really fun group, and we do lots of really fun stuff all around the Halifax Regional Municipality. So there's 3 different kinds of activities that we do in our program. The first one being outdoor adventure. So if you like to do things like kayaking and hiking, maybe you like to canoe, snowshoe, that's one part of our program. The other part of our program are conservation service projects. So things like our bat boxes, things like garbage cleanup, shoreline cleanups, removing invasive species, anything to do with conservation service. We also do that. And then we do things like guest speakers. So kind of like what I'm doing now for you, we bring experts in their field to talk about different things. So let's say you were really into bats, we'd have someone like Lori come in and talk about bats. Maybe someone wants to learn about marine conservation, or they want to learn about birds, we can bring people in to talk about that kind of stuff for you. And then obviously we do bats. So the Bat Box project was a huge part of our program. Again, here are some of our awesome youth. This was on Halloween. As you can see, one of our youth has a crow mask on for Halloween. That was a really, really fun day. That was the day that if some of you were there, you'd recognize me. We put up the bat boxes and played some fun games that day. So I'm going to just really quickly talk about the bat box stuff that we've done. We built 12 bat boxes for the Young Naturalist Club over the course of 5 separate days over the course of 3 months. It was quite a large project for our kids, and we had a really, really fun time. I've got a video here that I'm not sure if it'll play. It doesn't have any sound, or it shouldn't have any sound. But it's just one of our youth building the bat boxes there. We had a lot of fun. So it was a really good opportunity for our youth to kind of experience bat conservation firsthand. So like Lori said, the bats are in a bit of a sticky situation here in Nova Scotia and across the country. And so we really wanted to help out any way that we could. The Canadian Wildlife Federation also has their own bat initiative. So it wasn't just us. So combined with the Young Naturalist Club, we thought it was our due diligence to help out. We had a great time. Out of the 12 bat boxes, 5 have currently been installed, and the rest are either going to go on private property or they're going to be installed at a later date. So hopefully all of those bat boxes are become a home to some bats in the future. So I don't have too much more to say. Lori covered a lot of stuff about bats, so I don't want to talk about that too much more. But I do want to just leave some resources here. The Canadian Wildlife Federation has their own bat initiatives, and they've been doing a lot of work over the years to really help out primarily Ontario, but also around the country's bat population. So they have information on how to build bat boxes of various styles on their website. And they also have some information on what is hurting bats, including white nose syndrome, and how you can get involved. So I don't know if Becky, if we can put these resources up somewhere, or I can send them out for them to take a look at on their own time. But all the information that you need is right there for you. Those are the hyperlinks there. So I actually don't have too much more to say, but if anyone has any questions about my program or about the bat projects that we've been involved in, I would love to answer them. And thank you so much for listening to me. And I guess that's all I have to say, Becky.
Yeah, we can definitely make sure that goes up on both the Facebook event for our talk tonight, as well as our general social media platforms. We have a website page on the Naturalist Club's website dedicated to our bat project now, so we'll make sure that all of that goes up there too, as well as the resources that Lori gave us tonight too. Yeah, thank you both so much. Yeah, so the boxes that Taylor mentioned there that her youth made were part of the Young Naturalist Club project, bat stewardship project that we started last year, and our listeners are probably familiar with this by now because we've put up a lot of boxes. Our goal was 48 boxes across the province, and conveniently, the only place where we didn't have a chapter working on that project is in the Annapolis Valley, where, as Lori mentioned, you can also get bat boxes. So pretty well across the province right now, this is a really good time to get your hands on a bat box, or at least get some plans if you're interested in building a bat box. So Taylor showed some plans there for the flat boxes, and we definitely made some of those through the Young Naturalist Club project. And we also made some of the rocket style boxes, which were actually what MTRI referred us. So yeah, so great resources. We'll make sure that you guys have that after the presentation here. We'll move into trivia just so we're not keeping you guys too much longer. Before we get into there, we do have a few questions for Lori. So I'll try to make sure that I touch on some topics I know or I think might be in trivia too. So Lori, we're wondering, so you touched on this a little bit, but are some bats doing better than others? And if so, why?
Great question. So yes, that is the case. And a lot of this information in Canada has been a little bit of a lag because the disease kind of got to the States first. So we have a better idea about which bats are being affected there. And we're kind of seeing some of the same patterns here. And so I showed you guys the three bats at the top that were all brown. And so it seems like we're seeing the little brown bat kind of bounce back a little bit. So spots where we saw bats before, we're seeing some now, and of course, very low numbers. But some of those spots we've seen the number of bats increase over the past 5 years. But one bat, through the most recent research that we haven't seen much of, is the northern long-eared bat. And the reason for that, we don't really know why, but it's a bat that doesn't tend to go in buildings as often as like the little brown bat. So potentially something going on with there. They might be facing multiple threats. So bats are not only threatened by white nose syndrome, but other things as well, right? Such as wind energy, habitat destruction, and fragmentation. And so it will be interesting for us to look hopefully down the road at like why we might be seeing the little brown bat kind of potentially bounce back a little bit, and not so much the northern long-eared bat. But definitely the northern long-eared bat is I'm not going to say absent, but we haven't seen it much since white nose syndrome came. And this trend we're seeing in PEI and New Brunswick as well. So for the tricolor bat, it seems like there are some of them as well, but they're a lot harder to study. We have a lot relative to the little brown bat and the northern long-eared bat. We don't see them quite as much. So
interesting. And so how are our local bats listed in the States? Because quite a few of our bats are listed as species at risk. Is that also the case down there?
No. So the long-eared bat is the northern long-eared bat, or northern biotis, as it's also called, is listed in the States. But yeah, the little brown bat is not, and I don't think the tricolored bat is either. So we kind of reacted quite fast here. I think our listing of species is a little bit of a different process than in the States, and so we kind of saw them die off really quickly and really reacted fast. So it would be great if that was also happening in the States as well, but it definitely was the case here. We quickly listed them.
All right, and we talked a little bit about how folks can help at home. Bat boxes are definitely one way where you can provide some habitat for bats. When we're thinking about monitoring at home, so if you have a box, counts are a great thing that you can do if you have a box on your own property or there's one locally. But what about acoustic monitoring? Is that something that families can participate in by themselves, or does that require a little bit more expertise? What would you recommend if folks are interested in doing acoustic monitoring?
Yeah, so there are some little handheld ones that you can get to attach your phone. So there's a company called Wildlife Acoustics, and they have a fancy device called the Echometer Touch. So it's a tiny little device. I should have had it with me, but it's only about this size, and it attaches to your phone, and it can pick up those ultrasonic sounds that bats make. And when you have that device, it might help you detect a bat in the area that you visually might not be able to see. The only thing is that I think they're running up $200, $300, $400. And so that's quite expensive. So I think that's a bit of a barrier to everyone kind of having it home. Sometimes once in a while they have contests though to win them. So I'd keep your eyes out on that company to potentially maybe enter to win one that way.
It's probably a good plug for our YNC chapters, because each of our chapters now has one of those echo meters. So if you're not already a member of your local chapter, definitely get involved, because we can take you out monitoring. But yeah. So watch out for those contests. We share them periodically. It's a great way, to win an acoustic monitor. What other questions we got here? Are some bats easier to detect than others?
Yes. So, and by detect, do you mean like visually or with the acoustic monitors, or both maybe?
Oh, I guess either.
Yeah. Okay. So, yes. So depending on like where the bat lives. So for us, any type of bat or any animal that lives closer to where we live, we're more likely to see. So there actually might not be more say crows, but because we say live close to them or they like garbage, we see them more often. So I think bats is kind of a similar situation. So species like the little brown bat we see way more often because they love to live in our houses and things like that. But something like a species like the tricolor bat, they actually like to roost in old man's beard. So that is like that green fuzzy lichen that you might use to say start your fire if you're out in the woods. It grows on a lot of old kind of deadish trees. And so tricolor bats actually roost in a clump of that up in high trees. And so that bat you're probably way less likely to see because you're probably not you're not probably in an environment where you're going to as likely encounter that. Also, because bats are active at night, we tend to be asleep. So there are differences in detectability of like just visually how often you're going to see them, but we get lots of people who take photos of them, say on the side of their building during the day. And so they send them into this, and then we can get an idea of what type of bat they're seeing. For the acoustic side of things and detectability, little brown bats have a much louder voice than the northern long-eared bat. And so the northern long-eared bat has a loud voice, but it travels a really short distance. And so with acoustics, we have a much easier time picking up the little brown bat, which is really hard because it seems like the northern long-eared bat isn't doing as well. So it's hard because we can't detect it as often. So it's hard for us sometimes to be really sure, are we just not detecting the northern long-eared bat, or is its voice just not traveling far enough for us to pick up with acoustics?
Oh, interesting. Yeah, so there's a lot of things that go into bat monitoring. There's, are the bats present to begin with? And then there's, how are we detecting them? And which bats are getting picked up more than others? Yeah, neat stuff. Thanks so much for joining us, guys. Thank you, Lori, and thank you, Taylor. All right, we will end our stream here. Everybody have a good night. Bye.